with the public, the neighbors and stuff, and keep everybody happy. I know this is not everybody's favorite thing for.
I'll make a motion to approve the request for Johnny's Rapids Inn for the 3-day alcohol license premises extension to include the noise ordinance variances as presented here on the agenda.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, sir.
Jim.
Did you move this ahead?
Yeah, we moved item 6 to the top because we wanna do him and do the audit, the item 11 next.
Okay. Just a note, I'd like the minister to note that as an alderman for that area, I've had complaints, and some people are not happy with it. Okay. And the noise, drunkenness, so on and so forth. And I understand police have been called. I didn't think that, I had the chief upstairs for a minute, I didn't think to talk to him. Is he here? No. Okay. But just to note that I have an objection at this time, and I'll vote no at the council. Okay. All right.
And you came in a little late, but he was explaining, and I actually talked to the chief myself too,
You
but he's
did?
explained
Okay.
that there's some additional, I think Josh realizes that,
Okay.
there's,
Are you going to have any private?
Yeah, Stealth Solutions is going to do video surveillance outside the whole perimeter, whatever we can cover. And then
Okay.
I have 4 more cameras in the bar than there ever was before.
Okay.
I've met with Kurt Hoyer myself
Did you?
already,
Okay.
and we're planning to meet jointly a couple more times probably before this happens. We're gonna have bike patrol out, around the area that whole weekend to try to keep the.
Keep
You
the
know.
rowdiness down.
Right.
We're,
We just took over in March, and
right.
to be honest, I've never been to it, so I don't have the foggiest idea of what all the problems have been. I can't tell you I have all the answers at this point, but
Okay.
I'm working on everything, all the obvious common sense stuff, so
Okay. Well,
I want to make it right.
I actually had a call from a person who doesn't live in my district saying, I can hear that music all the way down here, and they were down by the hospital. So
Yeah,
it's just so that they'll get carried, and I don't know if you two may have heard it, perhaps you might.
sure, I'm Blockway.
You're close enough yourself,
And this is and we recognize, and I think everybody knows that you're not in really a bar district, and that's where that bar's always been. And
Yeah.
your potential for income on that weekend's got to be immense, as we
Sure.
all realize. I'm not totally happy about it in my neighborhood either, but
Right.
we got. I'm going to vote yes at the meeting, so
That's
just so
fine.
you know.
That's fine. And if I'm convinced differently, I might change my vote too, but, so, I just wanted to bring that up, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. So we had a motion.
I'll second the motion as presented.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you.
Thanks, Josh. Okay, so we're gonna go to item 11 now. Presentation of the city 2014 audit report by Shep. We'll let you go ahead.
Thank you. Yep, I got mine. Well, good evening. What I'm going to go through tonight is really the summary of the 2014 audit. There's 2 documents. One is the large annual financial report that contains your financial statements, contains the opinion. That's really the audit report. I'm not going to go through that in detail. I'll certainly take any questions on it. But the small stapled document, which sometimes is in the inside cover, is what I will go through. And that's exactly, that letter is exactly what this meeting is really just a presentation, a communication letter, kind of summarizing the audit. So we'll go through that real quick here. Page 1 through 4 is really the actual language, the management communication part of that. And it goes through a lot of different things. I won't read it all to you. Really doesn't change from year to year. What it does cover is our responsibilities, goes through, brings in some language from the opinion letter itself, which is in the front of that annual financial report. I'm happy to report that your opinion was unmodified, meaning we were able to issue a clean opinion on your financial statements, which all external audits, like this one, financial statements audits, really strive for. That's what you want, so congratulations there. 2 and 3, page 2 and 3, just kind of go through some of the discussion on internal control, and brings in on the bottom of page 2 just some key estimates that are contained in there. All that is really pointed out just for your information. It goes along with that annual financial report. Page 3, kind of a bunch of bullet points there, and that's kind of a snapshot for the governing body to really look at that, and management to look at that and say, how did the audit go? Did we have any disagreements? Did we have anything that we saw that we didn't correct? And there's nothing like that. Straightforward audit, so good job there, and I thank your management for assisting us and helping us through that audit. Makes for a much better product and a much better audit. Page 5 is what I want to focus on. Page 5 is a summary financial information, and what this does is just to make this conversation a little bit easier and a little bit less bulky to page through 5-6 pages of financial statements. We bring in just a couple pages and some graphs and to show you how the year went. So if you want to just take the whole column in total there on page 5, governmental fund balances on the bottom ended the year $22,173,806.
Pardon me?
Yes.
Page 5 of which this?
This document. I'm going through that document. Yep.
Thank you.
You bet. So you have $22,173,000. That is the total governmental fund balances. So that includes not only the general fund, but all your special revenue funds, your debt service fund, and your capital project fund. So I'll just highlight the general fund there. It's obviously the majority of that $22 million. You have a total general fund balance ended the year at $14.5 million, up from $13,700,000 in 13. We focus in on the various components of that fund balance. You have some non-spendable amounts, 3 amounts: inventory, $40,000. County held special assessments, $27,000, and then water special assessments, $48,000. All 3 of those non-spendable fund balances are really not available to you. They're on your balance sheet. They're part of your assets. They're part of that $14 million, but you don't have it. They're not available. So you have to really kind of take those off or categorize those separate. Then moving down to the middle there, you have committed for continuing appropriations and committed for future unreported medical claims, $3,800,000 and just short of $1,800,000. Those are funds that you, as city council or finance, have actually committed for. You actually have a resolution to commit those funds. And what that does is it earmarks it for various purposes. And again, that's an internal type situation, so you're kind of moving down a hierarchy. The top part, you don't have any choice. It's unavailable. The middle part, now you can commit and uncommit based on resolution. And then moving down, kind of the hierarchy here, you have assigned fund balance of $330,000. And that's just one level below. It's still an earmarked fund. You still have that set aside for subsequent year's budget or fund balance applied amount. But again, that's assigned, so it's even less strict or less structured than committed. And you can kind of move money in and out of that as you see fit. Certainly have some internal policies that you follow related to that. But certainly, based on the standard and the accounting rules, you can unassign and assign at whatever you want prior to the end of the year. And that brings back down to the actual unassigned fund balance. And that's the industry, governments as a whole kind of look at that number as, hey, that's your carryover, your unearmarked carryover into the subsequent year. So into 15, the year we're in now, you carried over $8,523,011. You turn the page, really kind of takes that concept and puts a little bit more perspective on it in graphical format. So that top graph there is exactly what we just talked about, but instead of just 1 or 2 year comparison, we gave you a 5-year comparison. So you kind of see how your total fund balance is going over those 5 years, which is essentially all of the colored lines, the entire bar. And then you can see the individual components, and that bright orange, that's your unassigned fund balance. So you can see how that has changed over time. And then based on that, at $8,523,000, a lot of times they have a question, is that enough? Is that adequate for emergencies, unknown things, for various things? Well, this graph puts that into perspective, and what it does is it converts based on a percentage of that number, $8,523,000, your unassigned fund balance, as a percentage of your expenditures. Sometimes you could use budgeted expenditures. Either one really just gives it, basically translates that into a percentage. And, GFOA, Government Finance Officers Association, recommends really 2.5 months as an absolute minimum, which is about 16%. We say 16, 15 to 25 is really the minimum that municipalities of your size should really have. So that's what that blue line is there. That's kind of the floor. You don't ever want to go below that, based on industry standards of having enough. So you're well above that, maintaining pretty consistent 46% fund balance. So excellent financial condition going into 2015. Any questions on that? Page 7 switches gears a little bit, and instead of showing where you ended the year, it actually shows how you got there. So you can see all your revenues, and this is the general fund now. Revenues of $17,797,000, and you can see that first pie chart there. Of course, the majority of that is taxes, is your tax levy. And the second biggest is your intergovernmental. That's your state and federal grants. So those two are by far the majority of your revenues coming in, which is expected. I mean, there's nothing unusual here. Certainly nothing different than any other municipality or city of your size. Expenditures, you can see that breakdown. Public safety being the majority, followed by public works, and then the rest of them. So you can kind of see how that categorized down for 2014. Page 8, again, switches gears to the city's health insurance, self-insurance fund. And again, we report based on this fund, we report based on the operations, how you got there, basically the income statement. Much more important than necessarily your fund balance is how you did during the year. So you have charges to city departments, $4,532,000. You have claims incurred for the year 2014 of $4,348,000. So you had an operating income this year of $183,000. And you kind of put that into perspective. If you look at the last year, your claims exceeded your charges by $567,000. And that's exactly what we see that fund doing is fluctuate, obviously, based on claims. Overall, you ended the year up with a fund balance of $1,790,000. So certainly as you fluctuate, you want to make sure you keep the balance in there in order to keep it funded. So. Page 9 really concludes and goes through your utility, your water, Wisconsin Rapids Water Works and Light Commission. I presented to the commission a little earlier in May and went through this in very good detail, about 10 pages worth of analysis. I'll just kind of pick the highlights here. What we're reporting here is really the rate of return. And any kind of business type activity within a government, your water, your electric, sometimes some governments have sewer also as a business type activity. And those three are really, or two in your case, are really business type activities. They don't follow the same rules as the governmental funds do, and they don't levy dollars for that. They actually fund their expenditures with user fees. So what we typically report in order to get a kind of an insight on how you did is the rate of return, much like your own investments at home or a business would have, and that's what we're presenting here. So electric utility is the left kind of half of that chart there, and you can see the average rate base for 2014 was $27,846,000. You can see how that was calculated there, and then the operating income per the PSC was a loss of $39,000. So you actually have a rate of return of a negative 0.14. Your authorized rate of return was 5.75. Now, the reason why that's so different is those rates just went into effect very recently. So it's going to take a year. It's going to take about 12 months in order for that rate of return. You requested 5.75. So ideally, if things stayed constant, that rate of return next year would be 5.75. Of course, things don't stay constant, but we would expect something near there. And the right-hand side is the water, and you can see a rate base of $23,285,000 as compared to operating income of $551. So your calculated rate of return for 2014 was 2.37. Your authorized rate of return was 6%. What that means is you requested at some point in time in the past, you set your rates to meet a rate of return of 6. So you're operating lower than that. So you certainly want to watch that, and the commission is certainly watching that. So
Part of that dip in obviously the rate of return could have been attributed to the cold winter and the number of water main breaks and things
Absolutely.
that, the repairs that they had.
Absolutely. And what we're seeing is government after government having almost exclusive, I think I had one that didn't, but it was an oddity, where we're seeing that go down. So what I always like to say is, you really can't tell the story, which is 2 years here, you gotta have at least 5, 6 years. Now, if you start seeing that trending down, and there'll be dips and valleys, of course, but if you start seeing the trend down, that's when you have to start taking a look at things.
And one question there.
Yes.
Where you have operating income per PSC.
Correct.
Public Service Commission?
Public Service Commission.
What's that mean in effect, operating income per PSC?
What that means, there's basically
They-
two reported operating income. There's the financial statements, which is the audit report, which follows GAAP, government, generally accepted accounting principles.
Okay.
Then there's a PSC, Public Service Commission,
Right.
which is your regulatory body. They have separate rules.
Oh,
Mostly the same, but there's a few things that we have to do for that. Well, your rates are based on the PSE, so that's why we chose to show that. We
Oh.
could show the rate of return for the financial statements, it would be slightly different, but your
Okay.
rates aren't based on that.
oh, okay,
Yep.
all right.
And then page 10 concludes the management letter, really by just giving you kind of an update of something coming up pretty quick here, and that's GASB 67 and 68. Those are new standards, new accounting standards for pensions. And what that really means is your next audit report, your next financial statement, 2015, is going to include this standard. And what the standard is really changing the game, changing the rules for reporting on pensions. So there's going to be some note disclosures, there's going to be some, possibly some financial statement issues, and what this is really referring to is your participation in Wisconsin retirement system as a pension plan, which most municipalities in the state participate in. So what they're going to do is the state is going to hire actuaries that are going to assess the Wisconsin retirement system's funding of its plan. So you have all these participants in this, and they're going to assess whether or not you're funded or not. Our indication is that it's either overfunded, so there'll be almost like an asset situation, or a slight liability. So state of Wisconsin's in pretty good shape. This standard, of course, is a federal standard. It is not that way elsewhere in the country.
Illinois
So,
might have a few different,
what's that?
Illinois might have a few different issues.
I won't name names, but yes, there's a few out there that are gonna have some significant liabilities. Now, when the shortfall is there, so in other words, you have a plan, a pension plan, and the state is not able to fund that, individual participants then are gonna have to record a liability for that, because essentially, that's who's gonna make that up. So that's why the standard is actually fairly significant, but we don't expect any ramifications in Wisconsin, which is good.
New York will be another one.
And the rest of the management letter is your representation letter that concluded this audit back on May 15th. So any questions or anything else you want me to go through, I'd be happy to discuss, or an audit in general.
Anyone?
Did you know Matthias Shevchik? Did you know Matthias Shevchik?
Yes.
That's my nephew.
Is that right? Yeah, he worked with us.
Well, actually, it would be
Haven't
to
heard
just
from
to
him in a while.
approve and accept the 2014 financial statement.
He did, yeah.
Just formally
It was
acknowledging that.
I think.
Reviewed it.
And I understand that.
Absolutely.
They have a child now.
Is that
Yeah,
right?
they
And this
have a
approves the
girl,
reports.
maybe about 2 months old now.
Questions? Let me know.
Yeah, I really like working with him.
All right, I'll make a motion
Tell him hi.
to
I
approve
will do
the
that.
audit
You are,
report
you are.
is given in tonight
Okay.
by Shank.
Second that motion. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You bet. Have a good night.
So now we'll get back on the agenda to item 2. We're starting over now. Item 2 is an application for a Class A liquor and beer license filed by Baker Drive Food Incorporated, Merlin Jeffrey, the agent, doing business at Quality Food IGA for the premises at 1811 Baker Drive. I don't think anybody got any questions on it?
No, that's what we had to go through.
That's what we did last time to approve the,
Make a motion to approve the application for a Class A liquor and beer license Baker Drive Foods as presented.
I'll second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried. Item 3, an application for a Class A beer license filed by Shopko Stores Operating Incorporated, LLC, Dan Cooley agent, doing business at Shopko, parcel number 12, for the premises at 1100 East Riverview Expressway. Any discussion?
I'll make a motion to accept the application for Class A beer license filed by Shopko Stores, doing business as Shopko number 12 for the premises of Riverview Expressway.
They'll be allowed just to offer beer as a sale item, correct?
Second.
Yeah, I would add, just for discussion, that it is, yeah, you're right, Tim, that is a new, they're gonna add beer to their sale items. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Item 4 is an application for a Class B liquor and beer license filed by Karen's Wines and Steins LLC, Karen Hofferman agent, doing business at Karen's Wines and Steins for the premises at 821 Baker, or, I'm sorry, Pepper, by my house.
Yeah, and all that is currently she has a reserve license, and now there's
She
a...
wants to, yeah, she wants to get the regular, right?
The regular one is, there's a regular one available, so she's just transferring it from the reserve to the regular.
So then another one will go back in reserve?
Then we'll have one reserve
One goes
for
back
somebody
in
else, so.
reserve.
So that's all that's happening there.
Make a motion to approve the application for a Class B liquor and beer license for Karen's Wines and Steins LLC as presented.
Second that motion. Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. And item 5 is an application filed by Karen's Wines and Steins LLC, Karen Hofferman agent, doing business at Karen's Wines and Steins to transfer a Class B liquor and beer license from the premises located at 821 Pepper Avenue to the premises located at 161st Street North, with the transfer taking place during the period of August 1st to August 31st, 2015, with 3 days' notice of the transfer date being given to the city clerk. So I guess I do have,
Yeah, she's just moving
She's just
locations.
moving.
Yep, and it's gonna occur sometime in August, so that's all that to do, just transferring the premises of the license you just approved in number 4
Right.
to that new location sometime in August.
That must be the old David Harold's building.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right, and it's gonna just be in the front of the building.
Right.
It would-
Yep.
yeah, we should specify that, right? Because there is gonna
It's
be
that-
there
There's gonna be another business
business
in
behind,
that
so
building.
she's gonna, they're having separate.
Right, and they've been working with the state and stuff on how to do
Oh,
that and
so
things
they're
like
gonna
that.
kind of, on second.
Separate, yeah.
Second will be one, on first will be another.
That's, yeah.
Right.
I mean, I would assume that's what
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
gonna
they've been
be.
working with our department and fire department to make sure there's sufficient separation between the two businesses to meet the state requirements.
And I think she wants that 3-day, because I suppose it depends on when they go, so.
Yeah, and it's just so that we have notice that when that transfer is actually taking place, the premises.
I'll make a motion to approve the application for Karen's Wines and Steins for transfer of the Class B liquor and beer license as presented.
Second that motion. Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Covered 6 already. Item 7, near and dear to my heart, a request from Shane Blazer, city clerk, to amend the special events policy to include a provision for staff approval of recurring events if they are unchanged. I've been talking about this one for a year, I think, and it's just, for instance, the 4th of July, instead of going over all the code and everything, they're just gonna be able to go to the clerk now, and if there is a change or something, he'll come to the council.
Yeah, I think the plan is yeah, just to have that, nothing is changed, or there's not any, there might be some slight changes, but they're not material or whatever, that affect, that internal staff review will approve it, and then I think then they plan to send notification to the council of that.
It'll
you know,
go to
this-
the actual meeting if.
That this was approved,
Yeah,
and so
something
that so
changes,
you're
it'll
aware
still
of
come
it.
back to
But if
here,
it's a
right?
material change or a new one, then it'll come through the finance committee and council
And
for
I think
approval.
that's.
I-
I'm in favor of that.
And I just had one thing about that. I wonder, I'd suggest to the committee that they have, like, if it's a new organization, someone that is coming to us for the first time. They may have a minimum of 2 or 3 occurrences that are clear and good, and then go forward from that. I suggest monitor it for a period of time, just to be sure that they meet, they're new coming in. So say to them, fine, let's see how you do, a couple of years, and that, you'll go forward and there won't be any problems. It's just a suggestion I'd have to the committee to consider.
Well, I mean, doesn't it say that though? It's a reoccurring event, so it has to happen
Yeah, he's
a couple
talking about
times.
But I'm
events that have been
thinking-
happening 10, 15 years, like some.
Those are fine, right, I know that, but we have someone new come and want to do this, that they've never done anything in the city before.
It still has to come here
It's gotta
first.
come here first.
Right. The new ones, but then it'd be monitored for maybe 2 years. The first year and the second year, okay, they're fine. Then they too get added into the clerk's network of approvals.
Yeah.
So maybe the reoccurring events would say at least two times or whatever. before.
Somehow it'd be modified to say that
After the second annual.
after the second annual, they would be approved, will have the clerk's approval. Just so that,
Yeah, because
Everyone
I think
has-
we just talked about one, to be honest with you, even though it's a recurring event, we're giving Johnny's we're gonna see how it goes, right?
Right.
But if
that's
there
a-
was-
that's a-
But if
he's
there was
extending his
if there
premise.
was a big event there, though, if something happened, it would be a significant change, and I think that's where Shane covered
But
that
is
in the
it-
language, that's a significant.
Right, and this one is because he's extending his
Yeah.
liquor license or whatever, a 3-day
So the-
premises
so the
extension.
Jim's
That
point-
has to still
yeah.
come through you.
Yeah, and to Jim's point, if nothing changed next year, we could
Right.
just say, okay, it goes to the council, but I think we would look at that one again next year. I think it's given us the opportunity to go one way or the other. I mean, we could still have an agenda on the finance property if we want it on there.
mhm.
If
But
we
I-
agree to have it on there.
I'm just saying that the new organization, two tries,
Yeah, I mean, I don't
everything
care
goes
that.
well, then you become a part of the recurring list
Why don't we do recurring, and Craig put in parentheses,
After-
like two
after 2 years perhaps.
2 years or something,
Second
2
annuals.
consecutive, yeah, second annual or something.
You know.
And I'm okay with that, I guess.
There might be some that'll just come in and do it once and be done. Others might come in and want to establish something. So we ought to have an idea, like this one there at Johnny's Rapids. Apparently it's become a little bit loud over the last
Yeah,
few
but you
years.
can't, you gotta give him a shot at it.
Oh,
because
yes,
he's the new
because
owner.
it's a new owner, correct. And that's why he's a new owner. It's been a recurring event. It's almost a standard, just like down there by the city on the 4th. You know, but I just want to offer that as a suggestion to the committee
No,
tonight.
I think we would, yeah. You guys okay with putting that in? I think
Sure.
it makes sense to us.
You wanna
Yeah, I would make a motion that we approve the request from Shane Blazer, city clerk, to amend the special events policy and to include a provision for staff approval of recurring after the second annual event to something like that in the parentheses, and if they're unchanged.
Yeah. Kind of like prove yourself.
Yeah, right, yeah.
Okay.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Item 7 was done. Item 8, final review and approval of the 2015-16 liquor, beer, wine license applications. We have a separate item here, so we're gonna do all the applications are okay, but we're gonna hold out the new body shop for a separate vote pending payment of their taxes, so I would look for a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the 2015-2016 liquor, beer, wine license applications, the
Excluding, we have to-
new and renewal excluding the new body shop.
Second that motion. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried. And then I would look for a motion for the new body shop to have their license, liquor, beer, wine license renewed pending payment of their deferred taxes.
I'll make a motion to,
It's like an 8A, I guess, Hepburn.
8A.
I guess, I don't know.
to approve, to hold out the new body shop's license until payment? Is that what you want?
Yeah.
Until,
Right.
or-
Did they have to pay by a certain date? When's the?
He didn't have that in here, but it just says they're delinquent personal property tax, there's no date.
I thought it had to be.
By July 1.
It's
right?
July 1, I think, is when they're.
Because otherwise,
right?
if they don't pay it, then
Yeah,
the license lapses. Don't quote me on that, I'm not.
I think they are for
Yeah, I
July.
think that's what occurs.
So-
That sounds right, doesn't it, Jim?
Yeah.
July.
Uh,
Put that in there. too.
After, they couldn't be open July 1st, for example.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They usually pay them like the 30th. Do we have a motion?
I made a motion.
Second.
Any further discussion?
Can you relate how far behind they are, or is that something for proper discussion, or?
No, it's the delinquent personal property, and it's like $246, is that what Sharon said?
Is it personal property? or
Personal
real-
property.
Oh, personal
I
property.
think it's
Okay,
pretty
sorry.
much the same every, I think they had the same
Right,
thing
okay.
last year, if I remember
Okay.
right.
I didn't know if it was.
but- No, that's a good question.
Real estate or?
Yeah, personal. Okay.
Anybody else? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried. Okay, item 9, revisions to chapter 14 building code, chapter 15 plumbing code, chapter 16 gas equipment code, chapter 17 electric code, and building permit fees. Adam?
I apologize. Let me start with that. I try not to do this too often, but every couple of years, we try to go through the ordinances that pertain to our department and really try and clean them up. Any issues we've noticed, any minor textual type changes. So this is that. If it makes you feel better, I also punished Public Works and Planning Commission with a similar request on some other chapters.
Good practice.
You
So-
happen to have an extra copy of this here?
I do
Hey,
not.
Jim, I've read it, Jim can have mine.
Okay. I've been through it too.
I don't know how much detail you want me to provide on it. If you want, I can just kind of go chapter by chapter and do a quick
Yeah, why don't you
highlight.
hit the high points.
For the most part,
I
it's-
think we've all read it, but.
Okay. For the most part, it's not much different than the overview that I provided. But Chapter 14, building, it's really one major change, and it is implementing a new ordinance that deals with raising, scrapping, and salvaging and recycling. Basically, right now, we only have an ordinance that says how the city can condemn a building and then go through the process of taking it down ourselves. There's nothing to prevent someone, for example, if the mill were to shut down tomorrow, there's nothing to prevent someone coming in, scrapping out the whole building, leaving just basically a husk behind and then walking away. And then the city is left with something that really probably has no value that the city is stuck with taking down in the future. So what this does is it basically adds additional language that says anytime you're gonna, not only if you're gonna take down a building, but if you're gonna go in there and scrap it, salvage, recycle internal things, you have to get a permit and you have to have an action plan and you have to basically lay out what you're gonna do with it. So ultimately, it's to protect the city from having a big white elephant in the community. So it's modeled off of an ordinance that's been done elsewhere in the state. So it's not standard operating procedure, but it's moving that direction as more communities have those large factories shutting down. So otherwise, in that ordinance, I think that is it. Yeah, so that's it for Chapter 14. It's just adding that entire section.
A question for you. On things like this, can these be sent electronically?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I can PDF, Word,
I
whatever
just-
works
I
easier.
would have taken my PDF and probably blown it up to 200%.
Yeah, when you add the little comments, which are helpful for clarification, unfortunately, the text gets way smaller, so I do
Right.
apologize on that.
No, that's all right. Just if you could.
Yeah, I can certainly do that. Any questions on Chapter 14?
Does that just pertain to industrial buildings, though, I'm pretty?
It actually is, it has language for residential, commercial, and industrial. Residential, it's not anything really different than what
No,
we
it's-
require now. It's
yeah,
basically
right.
notice that you've contacted utilities and how you're gonna get the site back to normal. Commercial, it's a little more, there's a little more meat to it, but then really the major meat is for those industrial buildings over an acre. So it's kind of a sliding scale through those three. Okay. Chapter 15, the plumbing code. First one is just adding some grammar. Then the second change in there is to strike a section relating to connection permits. That's actually dealt with in Chapter 8 of the municipal code, which is more of a sewer water type of code, since it's really talking about public infrastructure, not private infrastructure, which is really what our plumbing code is for. So I did verify with engineering, they were okay with that. And then the last one, and this is probably the most potentially controversial change of all of these, is the item on page 4 under section 15.1, construction of sewers. This is a recommendation that a lot of communities are doing. They're requiring at the time of sale of a building that if you have an unprotected floor drain in the basement or the lower level, that you actually have to go in and install some sort of backflow protection prior to changing of ownership. And what it's ultimately tied to is trying to prevent sewer and storm sewer backups into basements. So it's an additional cost on a seller, but it's protecting the new owners from potential basically backup issues and property damage in the basements. It's going to be one that's going to be interesting trying to enforce, to be quite honest, because it's hard to monitor something like that. So if this is approved, we would work with the Realtors Association, title companies, all those kind of entities, and educate them on this requirement, just so that they're aware that it's out there. It doesn't affect every house by any means. It's only basements where you have a floor drain, and those are obviously the ones that are most susceptible in really wet weather, or if there's a sewer backup down the line, that it's going to come bubbling up through the floor. So it's a little more progressive and could be a little more controversial. Actually, at Tim's suggestion, I checked with an insurance agent on the hope that we could argue that it'll actually save you money on your homeowner's insurance if you have the backup rider. That's usually an additional item you add to your homeowner's insurance, but right now there's no credit that would be in place with the backflow prevention device. So it would just be an additional cost. But we're tying it to the time of sale, just because that's something that, rather than going out and trying to inspect every single house, it's really just slowly trying to get these cleaned up over time.
Chairman, how would a person know if they have something like this or do not? Is there a,
If you got a
was
gas
there
furnace, you must have a.
period of time when this became a standard in the installation of the laterals to a home?
There is, and actually, I don't think an unprotected floor drain, you can't just put one in anymore. I don't know that exact date, but most times if your home is from the 50s, actually, I have one right now. So I would be one homeowner affected by this, in full disclosure. I'll have to be, if I ever want to sell, I would have to upgrade my home. But I don't know numbers or anything like that, but I can do some more research on it and figure out when that breaking point should have been, so that you kind of have a general idea. If my house was built in the 50s, you probably have this versus the 70s, let's say.
Because when we had the flooding a few years ago, there were some homes over on the First Avenue area. There was some flooding in there, and I guess it came up through the sewer in some instances.
Mm-hmm.
And the city has done something to ameliorate some of the problem, but an individual homeowner might not know unless they had someone come in and photo the system.
That's kind of what I was wondering, how do you know?
Well, generally, if there is a backup valve, there is a way to access it and maintain it and those type of things, whereas if it's just a normal drain, you're just going to have the drain itself sitting there. There's not going to be any other openings or egress into that drain. So there's going to be, it's relatively easy to identify. If a plumber walks through the house, they're going to be able to tell you without any expensive studies or anything like that. Cost-wise, I guess that's the other question. You're talking hundreds of dollars versus thousands for something like this. It's basically the cost of, if it's in the concrete, breaking it out enough to be able to install the valve. So it's not a terribly it's still a cost, but I don't want to minimize it, but it's not something that is going to make or break a sale generally.
Yeah.
Okay.
So ultimately, it's to protect the homeowner. It also, the city's not liable for a typical backup that's caused by nature or those type of things, so it doesn't necessarily get us out of any additional liability or anything like that, but it does prevent claims being filed against the city because the backups hopefully won't happen as often.
So would this affect renters too then? So, I mean, would it be?
It would be on the cost of the landlord if a landlord was selling a rental unit.
Oh,
So it's only sale of property, not
Sale of property.
rental. Yep.
So this is the sanitary sewer backup.
They would also be looking for cross connection. If you shouldn't have a storm drain that in the floor.
Mhm.
If you have a sump pump or something like that, it should be exiting out of the home and going
Right.
into the yard or into the storm sewer.
Mhm.
If they're putting it into a floor drain, that's technically illegal
Mhm.
as well. So this doesn't really change that. That's already illegal. So
Well, like, what I'm getting at, I guess, is my furnace.
Yeah, right, it goes into it.
it goes into a floor.
It goes into a floor drain. This drain, you want to have a valve on it.
Correct.
Okay, and that valve, is that going to entail busting up the concrete?
Most likely, yes.
If you don't have one.
I mean, each unit's gonna be a little bit different depending on how they can access it, but it could, yes.
Are homes, have they been, have they had valves like this installed recently? I mean, in the last 10 years? or-
Current code requires it, but when that code changed, that's something I would have to research. I honestly don't know.
Oh, okay. So-
When that change on when you could have those unprotected floor drains to today.
Okay.
Where you have to have
Well,
some
like-
sort of protection.
Like the sump pump, those have been sealed up and stuff like that,
Mhm.
right? But there is still a small, almost like a little shower drain.
Mhm.
For your.
Right. I'm sure there's,
Condensate.
right, for condensate,
Right.
so there's no valve there, but you're saying not one's gonna be needed now.
Yep. At the time of sale, if you were to sell the property, it would have to be installed. And again, that's because if there was a sewer issue down the line, it's gonna go where it can get out, and that would be that little drain. And again, it's something that, it's not common practice statewide. It's something that our plumbing inspector had come across and it was suggesting as a change. If it's something that you want to hold out from this amendment, I'm perfectly fine with that, and we can do some more research on it and try and get you some estimated costs. And I can get you the date on the ordinance. I'm not going to lose any sleep over it. It's an existing situation. It's just something, there's a reason I called it out specifically, because this is, like I said, this is probably the most controversial change out of all of these that I'm proposing tonight. So,
What type of claims do we have with this? I mean, how big of a problem is it? We had quite a few claims.
Well, people actually file a claim. I mean, people have backed up,
Yeah.
sewers, but they don't file claims. Some people try to file a claim against the city, but if the blockage is in the lateral going to the house, it'll get denied. It's the only time that we would be liable is if we became aware of a situation in our main line and didn't address it on a timely basis and someone's sewer backed up, then we would have to pay. But majority of the claims filed, if not all, get denied by our insurance company because it is the homeowner's responsibility. And that's why we always encourage to take that rider out on your insurance to cover sewer backups.
Yeah, so again, it's not necessarily to save the city any money because of insurance claims. It's ultimately it's tied to protecting the homeowner from that backup. Okay. I'll let you think on it and we'll continue on if that's okay. All right, chapter 16. This is one that was brought to my attention by the commercial inspector. We have this language in here that supposedly we're supposed to be inspecting all, how is it phrased? Basically all gas appliances or gas units within the entire city on a yearly basis. So that would be every furnace, that would be every hot water heater, that would be every boiler. I can tell you that, to my knowledge, this has never been accomplished by the city, nor is, no one can understand why it's in there. So it's basically something, if it's in here, we should be doing it. There's not a reason to be doing it, and we don't have the manpower to do it, so we're recommending to strike that language. So that someone doesn't point to that and say, I want this done, and says right here that you should be, so just to clean that up. Okay. And obviously, we do inspect them upon new installation.
Sure.
But it's just, we don't do a yearly annual inspection, as that's saying, so. Chapter 17, it looks like a lot, but really, everything is tied to in April 1 of 2014, the state took over all licensing of electricians. So we used to have a local electrician license. As of 2014, that's now illegal. You can't do it at a local level. You have to go through the state. So our code still had all sorts of references to our local licensing and the testing and the different license types and all that type and the fees. So this is really just to take it all out to make sure that we're compliant with that 2014 change. There's a couple of minor changes in there, like a code reference on page 1 was updated because the state has changed their code references. And then there is one change on page 6. That's clarification. So if you have a large industrial building and they're doing some internal work, redoing circuitry, that type of thing, it's not required to get a local permit as long as it's supervised by a properly licensed electrician. So that's kind of an exemption that's been in state law, and a little clarification in there with our local license. And then one clarification on conductors on page 7, also recommended by our commercial electrical inspector.
There's nothing in here that would prevent a person from doing his own work.
No, that's still allowed. You still have your homeowner's exemption.
Yep.
So you can still do. The one thing that we did change, and this was 3 or 4 years ago, is homeowner cannot do a service upgrade on their own. You
Right.
do have to hire an electrician for a service upgrade. And that was more because of timing. If you don't know what you're doing and your home is without power, and you have to redo it 3 times, and we have to go back multiple days, you're without power for multiple days. So that's more of a convenience thing. So so. And then the final recommendation is on fees. Believe it or not, I'm not necessarily saying that we should raise fees. Basically what this boils down to is we're trying to simplify our fee schedule. Currently, it's the 10 pages or something like that. That is the final part of your packet. And what we'd like to do is to be able to basically consolidate it for the purposes of the public into one page. And in order to do that, we're simplifying a lot of fees. One of the major examples is for plumbing. If you're doing a plumbing project, we have to know the number of fixtures you're doing, the size of the stack, if you're putting in a new plumbing stack, if the amount of water line you're putting in, sewer line, and all those things go into figuring out the fee. In comparison, if you're pulling a permit for a remodel project on the building side, all we need to know is either the cost or the size, and that's how the fee is set up. So we're basically trying to move the building fees, the electrical fees, HVAC fees, and plumbing fees all into that type of thing. So if it's a renovation project, it's based on the value of the work. If it's an addition or new construction, it's based on the square footage. So that's one of the first major changes. The second major change is that currently electrical gets a major share of the cost for a permit. So obviously, the lion's share is covered by the building itself, so that's where the majority of the inspections occur. But between the 3 trades, electrical, HVAC, and plumbing, electrical on average pays substantially more than plumbing or HVAC. So what we're proposing is actually to even those out. It actually lessens the electrical fees and slightly bumps up the HVAC and plumbing so that they're all on equal footing. So they're all tied to a percentage of the cost or a square footage of the project. So that is there.
That would be this page?
Yeah, the proposed one-page one is the page 101, and then the actual, we'll still have the detailed fee schedule, but what will be handed out to the public is the one page. Just ideally, we'd like to have it on the back of our permit application. And then there's, I don't know if you want me to go line by line through the 10 pages or not, but my attempt to summarize what's being changed is what I presented. tied to this project, we're also looking to consolidate our permit inspection forms so that if you are doing a project, there's one form to fill out where you put in all the information for the builder, and the trades to try and simplify it. And that's tied to the fees as well, so that we can compute those all. The goal is basically to have the lead person on the project pull the permit and pay the fee up front, so we're not trying to track down the plumber or the electrician or the HVAC guy down the line and trying to get them in for payment. And so just trying to streamline the whole process ultimately. So this is stage one of that. So that is my attempt to summarize all the code and fee changes.
Do we have to vote each one separate, or can we do them in one block sum?
I believe you can approve it as one block. The ordinances would be on the agenda for each one. There would be an ordinance showing the changes to each individual chapter, assuming these move forward. So at that time, I think you would approve changes to chapter 14 per ordinance, whatever it is, and then chapter 15. But for this purpose, one motion is fine.
Anybody else got any questions?
Does any other alderman have any problems with that floor drain?
I do. You know, I mean, I see the city comes in now, and actually, I think it's a private contractor that comes in, and they're attaching attachments to my utility sink and my water hoses and everything else. They're backflow valves of some type too, and they restrict the water flow, and you know, they're just a pain in the butt, you know. And I see this so much with this floor drain too. I would not be in favor of that at all.
I'm kind of torn on it, quite honestly, because part of me doesn't want it because it's a pain in the butt to enforce.
Right.
And yet, the practical side of me is saying it's for its protection, but I can see that side as well.
Mhm.
So again, it's something we thought we'd throw.
I kind of agree with Todd. I mean, it's the responsibility of the homeowner to protect his or her own property. If they choose to do that, put these in every drain and all the homes in the city is pretty costly. That's why I asked you about the amount and so forth and the claims. That isn't the homeowner, if they want to be sure that it won't back up, to put it in.
Mhm.
I mean, is it the city's responsibility to make sure that they put it in? I don't know.
You know,
Where's the line drawn? So,
Yeah, I don't really have a, I mean, I built a house in the city, I put drain tile around, a sump pump in the basement and everything, so I don't think I'll ever have any water unless I get a water main break,
Yeah.
but
yeah, and
I
I got
see
the
what
same
you're
thing
saying.
too.
I see what you're saying, you know, it's, you know, I'm sure we don't have those valves in our drains right now for the furnace, I mean.
Well, right, and that's what I'm saying too. I mean, my home's relatively recent, 7 years old, but I mean, there's a lot of houses that,
Oh, yeah.
you know, I see just an added expense to someone who's trying to sell their home, you know, and it's just a stumbling block to get that process taken care of, you know. I think insurance companies, they give incentives for people, they want security systems, they give incentives for other things too. If it was that big a deal, I think the insurance company could say, well, if you have this in your basement floor, you know, we'll give you a 2% credit or whatever. I'm not real convinced that it's something that would work anyway, to tell you the truth, because it's
Yeah,
a
not-
gravity flow,
It's a gravity, yeah.
you know.
And I'm hearing Adam saying he'd be okay with taking it out.
I'm definitely not going to lose any sleep on it if that gets struck.
I'll make a motion to approve the revisions to chapter 14, building code, chapter 15, plumbing code, with removing the sanitary drain backflow protection language in section 15.11, number 5. Approving chapter 16 gas equipment code as presented, chapter 17 electrical code as presented, and the building permit fees as presented.
The backflow's not state required yet.
I will second that motion.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried. Adam, I guess you're on for item 10, request from Adam Teagan, Planning and Economic Development Director for a 2015 funding request for Regional Economic Growth Initiative, Reggie. And I think we talked about this some before, but
Before you begin, can you give them a little background? Because I think most of, when we first did the first approval of the first 20,000,
Sure.
I don't think anybody here was on, were you on
No.
board?
I'm glad you gave it back.
Yeah.
Because I need a refresher too, because it's been a couple years and I want to know where the second 20,000 is going to go.
Certainly. Yeah, I'll try and kind of start at the beginning. Back, I believe it was about 3 years ago now, there was a study that was done by a manufacturing partnership that was looking at economic development and ways to grow the economy in the local area. One of the recommendations that came out of there was there's not really a concerted effort, a regional emphasis on economic development within our region. A lot of counties, actually the vast majority of counties within the state of Wisconsin have a economic development authority at the county level who really tries to coordinate and attract businesses and deal with site location and all those type of things. Wood County is not one of those. So we're kind of left to be doing it on an individual basis, either within my department, for example, within Wisconsin Rapids, Port Edwards, and those, they don't obviously have any professional staff for economic development at all. So as what that led to was a multi-faceted group. It involved municipal government from, I believe, Port Edwards, Wisconsin Rapids. Off and on, there's been NACUSA involvement and some others. It also involved businesses like Urkel Worldwide, Mariani, Ocean Spray. I think those have been kind of the major ones throughout the process. And then nonprofits such as Encourage, the Chamber, and some others. So basically what we have been working on, I guess, over the last 3 years is really trying to figure out what's the best way to go about doing this. Quite honestly, for the first 2 years, it was a lot of talk. There was a lot of visioning and trying to say, okay, where do we want to be? In the last year, that we put the nose to the grindstone, and what has happened is a new 501c3 has been created, the Regional Economic Growth Initiative. So that has been approved and in existence. A new board has been created. It currently sits at 8 people. I'm actually one of the board members, and then 7 others that are, again, a mixture of private business, nonprofit, and government. So it's kind of a wide variety of things. Ultimately, the mission of this board is to serve as the first initial point of contact, the one-stop shop for any businesses that are either looking to expand, relocate, or come to this area. So that there's a point person whose full-time job is to deal with economic development and nothing else. So that's kind of the ultimate long-term goal of this. Obviously, the outlier of that is then there's ideally economic growth and then more jobs created and the entire area is improving. So that's why we created the 501c3. That's an entity that can accept donations and you get tax write-offs so that we can attract foundation money and other nonprofit money. We can obviously accept donations. Our funding stream, if I'm all over the board, I apologize, but our funding stream is looking at 3 different routes. We're looking at government support, at least initially, and then we're looking at private business support, and we're looking at nonprofit, such as foundations. We set aside a 3-year funding plan to try and get this off the ground. So year 1 was complete as of, well, will be complete as of June 30th. And then year 2 would be the year we're asking for the support for, and then year 3 would be the following one. The nonprofit Encourage stepped up and set aside $200,000 to support this initiative, and then the budget for the amount of support that's being requested from governments is right around. It's about $70,000 a year total, and that's looking at the county, who has pledged $30,000 last year and this year. The city is about 20,000, and then as the municipalities get smaller, it's a lesser amount. The ask is set on your, the assessed value, I believe.
Equalized.
Sorry, equalized assessed value. So obviously, a larger municipality like Wisconsin Rapids is being asked to contribute more. Now that the entity is created, we have been recruiting for that president position, who would be that point person for economic development. There is a candidate that we have interviewed twice, and we're currently in negotiation with to hopefully hire and have on board by July. So that will finally be past the setup and into the actual implementation of what this group needs and wants to be. So the funding for last year, the $20,000, that was utilized as a local match for an asset inventory that is 95% done. We had presented on that briefly 3 months ago, I believe, so that may have been, I think maybe you weren't there, but I think everyone else may have been at that council meeting. John Bergen and myself just kind of provided a high-level review of that. So that's where the funding went for that project. With our local match, we actually were able to bring in $50,000 of support from the state level, utilizing the local funds. The funding for this year and the future years would be going towards the operating budget, so that would be towards the salary and startup costs for the actual having that person in place. So, but ultimately, like I said, bottom line is having someone 24/7 that can be dedicated, and their main focus is economic development and helping and supporting existing business and attracting new business. Because as you know, even Wisconsin Rapids, I'm the economic development person. It's not that I'm not great at my job.
I was going to say, that's your job title.
But you'll also note that I oversee the building department, do zoning, planning, and code enforcement. So I get pulled in a lot of directions. And quite honestly, I wish I had more time for economic development, but I just can't dedicate an entire week to it. So I can react, but I'm not proactive on economic development. And the goal is, with having this regional entity that can focus on that proactive side of things. It would still rely on us, so if there is a site that works in Wisconsin Rapids, they're still going to come to the city, we're still going to work with them, we would still be the negotiators on a development agreement, that type of thing, but they're that initial point of contact.
So 3 years, this is the second 20,000.
Correct.
And then next year, or the year after, you come for the following 20,000, so the city would be involved for about 60,000.
Right. That would be the ultimate ask.
Will the person get a 1-year contract, or who are they answering to the board?
They would answer to the Reggie board. The goal would be to have a 3-year contract. So obviously, the role of that person would be establishing funding streams to make sure that they are
See, that's why I was
still
thinking
paid.
annual, that would be more
Correct.
accountability,
Right.
rather than I got a 3-year contract.
Right. Well, the reason the 3-year contract was proposed, quite honestly, is, I mean, I've been here 4.5 years. It probably took me 2 years to get the lay of the land and to actually feel like I could make a difference. 3 years is really just to give someone enough time to actually make a difference before there's a renewal on it. So that's why that was picked
And be
versus a
able
year
to
to year.
get a good candidate, too.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if someone's going to relocate and take a job on a 1-year contract. It's a little shaky, but.
That's why you're an alderman with a 2-year term.
So you finally learn what you're doing and then you're out the door.
Anybody else?
And just one final thing I'll add is that asset study, like I said, it's 95% done. Just got the final draft today, actually. I haven't had a chance to review it. But the desire of the Reggie board would be to come back either at a committee of the whole or a finance committee or council or something like that and give an update on the findings and recommendations that came out of that report. It's just not quite there, and so we didn't want to give you another overview without it being complete.
So what if they don't get a president in the next month? Then what?
Please don't ask that, because this is our second round of interviewing for it, so if this candidate is not there, then we would have to be going out and recruiting and trying to find that spot. Obviously, if they don't spend the money this year, it would go into the fund so that the balance is there. there are small costs being incurred now, but nothing.
As far as governmental participation, you said the county gave 30, and
Mhm.
you're looking for 20 for Wisconsin Rapids.
Mhm.
I'm just wondering, did the city of Marshfield participate at all?
No, they have their own
Okay.
economic development entity that they are supporting up there that's
Okay.
focused on Northwood County. And
Okay.
so the county did support them to the tune of right around that same amount
Okay.
as well. So the county has made that commitment to both ends of the county.
Because I guess I was concerned that if we're we're paying a large portion or a portion of that
Mhm.
particular salary or whatever, that wasn't being diverted up to Marshfield, so.
No, the Reggie target area is Southwood County, Northern
Okay.
Adams.
Okay.
So it basically includes the river cities, town of Rome type of thing. And I believe at the previous year and this year, I believe, town of Grand Rapids has actually participated and supported it as well. Port Edwards has, Nakusa has, Buren has, town of Rome, I believe, has. And then
They on board for the second installment also?
yeah, they were approached at the beginning of the year. The funding source for this, I guess I didn't cover that, was the room tax dollars that are set up for economic development. That was kind of earmarked, I guess, or expected that if the city supported this, that's where those money would come out of. So we didn't ask it as part of the budget process because that's where the money would be coming out of. The other townships and municipalities were approached as they developed their budget.
How much money do we have in there right now?
In the economic, a little over $80,000.
Well, I wasn't a big fan in the beginning, but the council back then made basically a commitment, so we'd all look foolish if we
Yeah.
denied it now. What are your thoughts?
Yeah.
Well, I surely wouldn't say we're throwing good money after bad. I think there will be some value to this, and I think we are in somewhat desperate need of some development in our city and in our area. So you look at our industrial parks are not anywhere near capacity. You got one in Nakusa and one in Buren that are empty, so we need some help, so.
And if you get one business, they'll pay for itself.
Certainly.
So-
Yeah.
It's a big number.
Well, I think it's one of those initiatives where you have to give it a certain amount of time just
Certainly.
because of, just the nature of trying to recruit, get someone on board.
Mhm.
But I think, there's gonna be a point down the road where you're gonna have to really sit back and evaluate, okay,
Yes.
is this an effective use of these funds?
Sure.
And what are the results of, the Reggie initiative and things like that? But I think there's a certain time period that you have to give it
Mhm.
to see if you can get some positive results out of it.
And I am a little biased, but one thing that is unusual is because there is a private, there are 2 of the members out of the 8 at least are private businesses, and they're would be pledging support as well, and they're not going to want to continue. They're going to have an even shorter attention span, quite honestly, than a government agency or a nonprofit. They're going to want to know what's my return on investment.
Sure.
But they've understood that 3 years seems reasonable to be able to get this off the ground, to get we had a lot of legal paperwork to even get to where we are today, and now we're finally getting to where we have that position, and that's when you can finally start to see all the hard work that has gone in, hopefully begin to end in
So how did you
results.
come up with the 20,716?
It's based on the equalized assessed value. They set a target goal of, I want to say it was 80 or 100, I can't remember the exact amount for municipal support. And then based on that equalized assessed value, they kind of allocated that based on that amount.
So we can't make a motion to just round it off to 20,000 even?
I mean, you're the council, or the
19.5.
committee, you
I
can
know
do
there's
what.
a 19.5.
I would recommend rounding up to 21, but, but again.
We work with, we developed this formula based on equalized value, so we plugged in what the municipality share or the governmental share would be, and then based on the pro rata share, this is what kind of the funding amount is, so.
If you want to increase funding, it's always best to put that on the front and reduce it.
I want to say, no, actually, I think it was 70,000 private, 70,000 nonprofit and 70,000.
It's kind of like the same way we determine the airport appropriation, that's why we always have the odd amounts.
Anybody else on this one? Entertain a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve for the 2015 funding request for Reggie of $2,716. $20,000. $20,000.
You really reduced it.
$20,000.
I'm not gonna be allowed in the board.
$20,716.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Motion carried. Done with 11.
Thank you.
Number 12 is a resolution amending the 2015 budget. Thanks, Ed.
You too.
Okay, this is a resolution just transferring funds from contingency to cover the 2015 cost of living increase that was approved at the successful negotiations of the police and fire contracts and the approval of the non-union wage increase and local 1075 and asset wage increases. As you recall, when we approved the budget last November, at that time, none of the 2015 wage increases had been approved or settled yet. So the budgets were compiled using 2014 rates. Now that the bill's been approved, I've calculated what the effects are on the budgets and transferring those funds from contingencies to cover that increase in the various operating budgets. So it's pretty much straightforward, it's just kind of more of a accounting bookkeeping.
I'll make a motion to approve the resolution number 15, amending the 2015 budget as presented.
Second that motion. Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried. Then we have the agenda item 13, beverage operator license applications. There were no, I think they're all good, they're all good. Entertain a motion to accept the beverage operator license applications as presented.
I'll make a motion to accept the beverage operators licenses as
New and renewal.
new and renewal as proposed.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carried. Audit of the bills, item 14.
Everyone's favorite.
That's a meal, ain't it? Everyone's favorite. What do you take mine?
No, you can have mine.
No, here it is. Jim here for this one, he usually picks out one that's.
the $30, Mr. Kellogg.
Taking trips again?
Yeah. Mid-state.
What page is that?
Workshop.
More of a comment, I guess. We started our hail damage repairs.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
$2.5 million.
Right, yeah, that's when we signed the contract. We make it up to them so they can order material.
But we have started.
Yes.
Holiday wholesale, is that the library stuff, the coffee shop? Thanks, that's
What
what
page is that on?
25.
I'm thinking of the library unit.
Yep. That is the library.
All right, I have no questions.
No questions. Questions over.
I have no questions.
I'll make a motion to approve the bills.
Second. Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried.
Motion to adjourn.
Second, adjourned at 6:18 PM.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Aye.
Come on, Chairman.
We got another meeting?